Hi, everyone. It's Natalie. We're talking about change today, and maybe that change for you is a job, a relationship. It could be a friendship. We all get stuck and sometimes face fear when it comes to the thought of change. I had the privilege of talking about this recently on a friend's podcast, Teri Karjala from Talking with Teri. She asked me to come onto her show to talk about my recent big life change, starting this podcast. In today's episode, you're going to hear that discussion about how I started my TV career. Also, then went on to have kids, got married first, had kids, worked the morning show, and then conquered change and fear. I want to thank Teri for inviting me onto her show. I love being a guest on other shows. However, I have to admit, I'm used to being the one asking the questions, not answering them. For more on Teri's podcast, see my show notes. Let's dive in and let me know what you think of this episode and how it has you thinking about making a change. And by the way, I want to remind you, it's never too late. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome back to Talking with Teri, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And our guest today is the one and only Natalie Tysdal, journalist and podcast host. She has received many accolades over the years for her work, including Emmy Awards, Associated Press Awards, the Gracie Allen Award. After leaving her 28 years as a TV anchor, she has now turned on her own camera and decided to create the business of her dreams by bringing the stories that matter the most. Welcome, Natalie, to the show.
Teri, so good to see you and to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
I know. I'm excited. I don't know if you remember this, but when you were on the Everyday Show, I was actually a guest almost 11 years ago. I was telling my husband the other day, I was like, after we had a conversation, I was like, I was pregnant with my daughter on the show.
I probably was too. It was 11 years ago. I maybe just had my son who's about to turn 12. So,
oh my goodness. Yeah. So anyways, but it's great to have you. I would love to have you bring us up to speed for folks that don't know you yet, but get quite the treat to dive in and learn more about you today. So tell us how you got to be where you're at today.
Oh, total life transformation. And I know that's what you like to talk about. And I want to encourage people, you can do that anytime in your life. It actually took a lot for me to make the decision to change things. I spent, as you mentioned, 28 years as a TV journalist. I started as a photographer, a videographer when I was in college. I thought I wanted to be a videographer. I love doing video and photography, but then found myself working in the depth of the newsroom as a producer. I then became a reporter, and you just kind of move through the cycle there as a journalist and made my way as a reporter to then being a TV anchor in various markets around the country, kind of work your way up in markets. I worked in Nebraska where I went to school and then took a job in Idaho, moved down to Alabama, was married, then to Texas and then to Colorado. Most of my career I've spent in Colorado, and for most of my television career did morning news, which I loved because it allowed me to be a mom in the afternoon. But that started to take a toll on my health. When you're getting up in the middle of the night, 2:30 in the morning, seemed like a great idea when I could be home with my kids. And so I thought, as a mom, we sacrifice, right? So I'm just going to sacrifice a little bit of sleep, get up early, be home by noon, and then I get to be a mom all day. Pick the kids up at school, do the cookies, all that. But I started to realize just how taxing that was on my body. And I didn't want to work the evening news, which is another good shift when you have a baby, but then you're not there when the kids are done with school to do homework and games and all of that. So I'd say over the last 3 or 4 years, I started to question, why am I doing this? Am I doing it because it's what I studied? Or am I doing it because I think it's what everybody else thinks is a good job? Because people would always say, you have a dream job. Oh my goodness, you're on television. And I'd say, okay, but I had to really reevaluate why I was doing it. I love being a journalist. I love asking questions. I love getting to the truth of the story. But do I need to do that for a TV station? And during the pandemic, I realized, as I was broadcasting from my basement, as many journalists were, I don't have to work for someone else. I can do this myself. So the light bulb went off. I started my own podcast and my own website, and there we go. That was my transformation. I'm no longer working for another journalistic corporation.
Yeah. So what has been your biggest, challenge or barrier or block that you've had to overcome to get to where you're at today? with making that choice? Because I know that that's not an easy choice to make.
Sure. And I think for a lot of people, when you're in a secure position, you think, oh my goodness, going out on my own, that's overwhelming. And it certainly was for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I went in, did my job, came home, did my research. I kind of had the checklist and I knew it. I could almost do it in my sleep. And I say, sometimes I think I did
Yeah.
do it in my sleep. So I think that the biggest thing I had to overcome was the fear of doing something else and doing it for myself and starting over. And it is scary. I encourage people to try, but I remember early in my career when I was about to make a transition from evenings to mornings, and I was moving from a prime position at an NBC affiliate that I just loved on the Gulf Coast to move. And I was secure and I was happy. And I remember giving myself 3 things to think about before I made a transition. And I don't remember where I heard this or I came up with it, but I have referred back to it over 20, 30 years as making a transition and how to do that. And those 3 things were, am I proud of what I'm doing? Am I proud of the organization I'm working for? Do I walk in and walk home and talk about it and feel just proud of it? And then the second thing is, am I challenged by what I'm doing? Because if we're not challenged, we're bored. And
Yeah.
that challenge doesn't need to be challenges with personalities or personnel, but am I just challenged every day? I want to feel like I'm working towards something.
Yeah.
And then the third thing was, am I happy? Do I wake up in the morning just happy to go to work, happy about what I'm doing? So proud, challenged, and happy. And I thought back at that reading through an old journal, which I encourage people to do, as hard as it is to take the time to do it. And I remember in my job last year thinking, oh, okay, let me go through those 3 things. I'm challenged, but not like I want to be challenged. I'm not
Yeah.
always proud, I'm sad to say, of journalism today. And that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
I wasn't always proud of the product. And I wasn't very happy, mostly because my health and the time that I did have with my family, it wasn't quality because I was tired. So I really had to reevaluate and then say, it's time. As hard as that is, it's time. And so I took the leap.
Wow. And I think there's a lot of people that are afraid of taking that leap because, especially when we have, and I think a lot of folks, including myself, like I was working as a therapist in a very great company and I really enjoyed it. But there was something like you were saying, like, without even me really realizing it, I kind of had gone through kind of a similar checklist of like, am I happy here? Am I really doing what I'm called to be? And, that taking that leap when it's something that's secured, there's benefits, there's paid time off, there's like all these other things that
There's a
make it
paycheck,
worth. Yeah, it's a
I mean,
paycheck. It's a consistent paycheck, right? And
right.
so when you're thinking about that and if you have a family or if you're married or in a relationship, like there's other people that's that's reliant on the paycheck that you bring home. And so I think it's incredible. And what I remember asking my husband, I told him, like, it got to the point where I was being challenged by being asked to do something unethical. And I was asked to do this like 6 months prior, but I said, no, I'm not going to do that. This is why, blah, blah, blah. Well, then they came back 6 months later and they said, you are going to do this. And I said, that's unethical for me. And I just drew the line and I said, thank you. And I just knew in my heart right then and there that I'm giving my notice tomorrow. And it was one of those things. It's like, okay, here it is, but we figure it out. And I remember my husband saying to me, he's like, what's the worst that can happen? He's like, you fall on your face and you go get another job. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, that's the worst that can happen. Like, I fall on my face and I go get another job.
Yeah.
And so that was 25 years ago and have not had to go get another job. But I think there's a lot of folks that, it is terrifying. And I think, what is the worst case scenario? And are you willing to live with that? And, going through, like you said, like, I love your checklist of really evaluating and reviewing what is it for us that's really making us happy, because are we just staying in a job because of these other reasons that may not be relevant to what is happening in your life now?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, the paycheck obviously is a big deal. We can't all make that decision. But
Yeah.
what you can do is
Mhm.
dabble in something else and
Yeah.
start planning and then take the leap. So
Yeah.
to take a leap with no plan, well, maybe that's not such a
Maybe
good
that's a
idea.
smart. Yeah.
But I knew for the year I signed a contract and I knew that full year, I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know I'm leaving. And I almost needed that year to really confirm because I was more tired that year than ever before. Just knowing, because I was dabbling, I was starting, I was planning while I had that. So have a plan. Map it out, know what
Yeah.
it is so you give yourself that confidence before you make the transition. But the worst thing you can do is stay somewhere where you're not happy, you're not proud, and you're not challenged, because that's not good for anybody,
Yeah.
including your own mental health. Are you looking for ways to stay energized, healthy, and help your family stay healthy? I've started taking supplements from Seeking Health, and it has changed the game for me. I no longer worry that my family is getting enough of the vitamins we need, and I know the quality of what we're taking is top notch. I take an immunity support supplement, magnesium, and several others, including electrolytes to stay hydrated. So many people ask me about these supplements that I've made it really easy for you to find right on my website, natalietysdal.com/favorites. Also, bonus, I have a coupon code to help you save 10% on your order. You will find that coupon code on the website as well. Go to natalietysdal.com/favorites, click on Seeking Health. I may earn a small commission if you purchase there, but that's just to help my small business grow, the website and the podcast, to keep this news and good interviews coming your way. Again, natalietysdal.com/favorites and click on Seeking Health.
Yeah. And I think for ego wants to be safe and it wants to be secure.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
absolutely what you said is like if we can dabble and create like a little side hustle.
Mhm.
And that side hustle, I always tell people like try to do at least 50% of your income in the side hustle before you take a leap, because that will give ego a little bit of like, okay, at least it's 50%.
I can do this.
I
Yeah.
can do this. And as soon as I'm not a huge fan, and some people that have heard me talk on my Facebook lives have heard me say this before, is like having two things going at once.
Yeah.
Because what happens is energetically we put in energy over here and we put on the gas. And then when we hop over here, we're putting on the brake over here, we're putting the gas on over here. And energetically, we can never be 100%.
Yeah.
But if we have an end goal in mind with like, okay, for the next 6 months, we're going to do this, that is different in the sense of like we're gonna now, oh my goodness, I don't know why that just popped in my head, but if anyone has ever learned how to slalom ski, usually you'll just start with two skis and then you
Yes.
learn how to drop one, right? And
Right.
it's kind of like that. It's like, okay, having two, right? And then
Mhm.
dropping one and focusing on the other one, right?
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from.
That's a
I've
great
never used that
analogy.
metaphor.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
like letting, and it's like, okay, now it's time to let go, right? Let go of the attachments that we've had with the other piece, and let's fully 100% invest in, dive in, to what we're doing now, because that is really giving us the winning edge. Because if we've always tried to plan, I was talking about this the other day, is, if we have a plan B in place, right? Let's just, I was saying the other day, like, why having plan B's are a terrible idea, because, we then, want to spread our energy. But if we commit to that plan A,
Yep.
there's, in my experience, when people have committed to plan A, yes, there's bumps along the way, but plan A typically works out. Like we
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you just really have to commit to it and know that there's a timeline, because there are busy seasons in our life
Yes.
where okay,
Hmm.
3 months, I can do this. For me, it ended
Yes.
up being that year. But as soon as I knew I had made the decision to leave the TV station, that year became more difficult. Like you said, my energy was
Yes.
over here with the new thing. So finishing out that contract was like pulling teeth every day because I was so
Yes.
excited about this new thing. But I knew there was an end date in sight. And
Yes.
I also want to encourage people, because I have several people who come to me over the years that ask for a job reference, and they ask if I'll call the new employer when they're looking for the job. And I told a young woman the other day, I said, don't be afraid to leave. you're not where you were 5, 10 years ago when you were first looking for a job. You've built up all of that experience. You have all of that now. So even if this job doesn't work out, and I know you're scared, whatever that new thing might be, you've still got that experience that will
Yeah.
never leave, that you can take to whatever that next thing is. And that next thing will be there. Have confidence.
Yes.
And that's hard for people, but
And it's,
have confidence.
yeah. Yeah. And that's about like trusting. Like that's trusting ourselves. That's trusting and having faith and like,
Yes.
okay, I'm not sure how or what this is going to look like, but I just trust
Yeah.
that this is going to work out.
Yeah.
And when we have that, belief, I always tell people that things get created twice, right? Twice, once in our imagination, right? Once in our thoughts, and then once in reality. And so, having that faith and having that trust and saying, okay, this is going to work out, right?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I agree.
What has been some of your lessons over this journey for yourself? Like, what have been some of the life lessons for you?
So many through the years. I mean, being a journalist is such an awesome career. And I'm teaching now as well, which has been another new thing. I mean, the podcast was what I was excited to do to create this new brand, to really focus on the things over my years as a journalist that I felt like were changing people's lives, not the everyday breaking news that's fires and crime and politics, but things that really change people's lives, things
Yeah.
like better health, improving your family life, finding ways to be inspired, positive mindset. Those were the things I really wanted to focus on. So that's what my podcast is family, health, and mindset, all topics related to that. But what I think I've learned as being a journalist that I've been able to bring to now my students teaching journalism and my podcast is, like we said a second ago, not to be afraid, to jump in, to always ask good questions, and to have that faith in yourself. I've had to have every day as I went in as a journalist. It was like I learned something new every day. One day it might be on real estate. The next day it might be on politics. The next day, and every day I was learning something new, and to not be afraid at any stage of your life to learn.
Yeah, I love that. And I think those that stay curious, those that, become these lifelong learners, I mean, it just brings such value to our lives. And I think it gives us an opportunity when we get into that state to, not only us be mentored by other people, but also us to mentor others, right? And we allow, we kind of build as we climb, and we help support others, in this journey, this thing called life, right? So it's beautiful. It's a way of serving. It's a way of helping. And I think more than ever before in our lifetime, it's no longer a option. I think it's a requirement now that we start to shift and look at, how do we be inspired? How do we, take that next step of creating the life that we love, right? Because I think so much has changed even in the last 2 years for a lot of people. And we need this right now more than ever before.
Oh my goodness, do we ever? You just reminded me, I was taking my son who's 12, as we just talked about. I was taking him to a basketball practice last night, and he had just come off of a golf practice. So his stuff all falls on the same day, and it just happens that way. And he was so tired because he had walked the 9 holes and he was going into basketball, and he said, "This is just really hard." And I stopped, and it was such a good teachable moment. And I think from 12-year-old to us later in life, saying, you know what? You were made to do hard things. Like God made you to do hard things. And if you ever stop doing hard things, you're going to get bored. Like, remember that when you walk in and you go, "This is hard," go, "Oh, good. This is hard. Okay, let's do this." Like, and I try to tell myself when learning the technology to podcast and broadcast and social media and all of that, I've always been kind of good at that, but I had to step that up big time creating my own company after working for another company. But I knew, like, I can do hard things. That's okay. I was made to do hard things. And taking my daughter to college, my oldest, and, walking away from her, I'll fill up with tears right now, leaving her halfway across the country and saying, "Okay, Mom, I can do this. I can do hard things." And telling her that, like, I know this is stretching you, and I know I'm going to miss you, but you were made to do hard things. You can do this. And so I continually remind my kids and myself that when I'm challenged, because I don't want to be bored.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think that's a powerful message to say, you know what, we can do hard things. And these are the hard things that make us, right? This is what makes it, this is what grows us. This is what, allows us to go to that next level. And so that's a beautiful message and a great takeaway for people to just to remember that, that message.
Yeah. And not only, I just want to reiterate, not only can you were made to.
Yes.
That's how we were designed. And so
Yes.
to tell yourself
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, I am made, I'm going to do this. I was
Yeah.
made to do it.
I will share a lot of times with people and say, we're never given more than what we can handle.
That's right.
Right.
That's
We
right.
can, we are given what we can handle. And then I just trust and know that, okay, this is this might be, I feel like a gut punch right now, but it's like, okay, there is something in this for me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's usually such a life lesson, a profound, like you said earlier, transformation that comes out of that. And I'm like, okay, so sometimes I have my mantra is like, this is happening for me, not to me. This is happening for me, not to me. And I may be rocking, okay, and saying this, not to go crazy, but I'm like, okay, like it is here for us to serve us in some greater capacity that we may not even know. And I just had a conversation earlier this morning about, sometimes we are given, these experiences that, we don't even know how it's going to impact us
so
years
true.
from now.
That's right.
Yes, 2020 is always better when we look back, but, we look back and we're like, oh my goodness. And there is a time and a place, I do believe, that when we are forced to do the hard things in any aspect of our lives, that at some point we can look back and say, okay, yes, I get it. I get why it was showing up now.
Yeah, we never know it during those hard times. But I'll give you another example though. My oldest daughter, whom I talked about, who goes to school in Florida, she's a college lacrosse player. And you're just going to go through sports and anything, but let's use sports through ups and downs. We never grow on the peak, right? There's nowhere left to go. And so when she was having a hard time, and I just continually remind her too, we learned so much through parenting, right? About life, that we're only going to grow in our valley. So we are going to, the pandemic was a valley, but boy, did a lot of us grow in different ways. So when you're feeling that depth of hurt, whatever it is, go, okay, this is where I'm going to grow. I'm in the valley. I got to work my way back up to the peak.
That's beautiful. What a powerful way to end our call today. I would love for people to check you out, check out your podcast, check out what you're doing, because, you are sharing stories that matter and it's profound. Like we need more of you in this world. So where can people find you?
Well, as I mentioned, my podcast, my website, my blog, everything I do, my YouTube channel is all focused on health, family, and mindset. Lots of topics around that. They're never ending. You can find me at natalietysdal.com, from my YouTube channel under N Tisdal, all my social media under Natalie Tysdal as well.
Awesome. We'll be putting all that information in the show notes. And thank you so much for being the light. Thank you for having the courage and also being a role model, not only to your kids, but to everybody else that you come in contact with. It is a profound honor to have you on our show today. And thank you so much for what you do.
Same to you. Thanks.